connect.
Yeah, I agree. Good morning, Sharon Goldman. I'm taking a little quick peek down at the chat. I'm going to close it in just a second so I don't get distracted when we get started. We have about 1 minute to go. It's 10:29 Central Time, 11:30 Eastern. We're going to get started right at 10:30. Alyssa, what's our participant count now? There, oh my goodness.
327.
329. I'm growing. Wonderful. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and close this chat so I don't get distracted by all of your lovely comments. If you're joining us, good morning. Welcome to our webinar. This is Leveraging Home Language and Environment During Distance Learning. My name is Anna Mattis, and we're going to be joined with Alyssa Jean from Ellevation. Hi, Alyssa. Now, I'm going to give you just a little bit of background before we get started while we're building our participants and letting them come in. One quick second. All right. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Anna. As I mentioned, I am an author and consultant and the product manager for Sidelets Education. Sidelets, if you don't know a lot about us, we are a community of authors and educators. We provide professional development all over the country in the fields of English language learners, bilingual, dual language, foreign language. We're going to be talking a little bit about the collaboration between our two companies. I myself was a former world language and ESL teacher. I was an L instructional specialist, which is something that Alyssa and I share. And I did my graduate work actually with heritage language learners and the home language and focusing on why that's so critical to instruction. So it's very relevant to our topic today. How it plays in a little bit with Ellevation, you have in the corner over there the logo for Highest Aspirations, which is a podcast produced by Ellevation. And I had the pleasure of being on a 2-part podcast series with Steve Sofronis, where we talked about the joint collaborations between ESL and world language teachers and what they can learn from each other. And one of the primary things that Steve and I discussed was actually the home language and the power of that. You might be familiar with it as the primary language or the L1, but it's really critical that our students that speak another language at home, they have that solid understanding, and that can play into that transition when they're learning a second language. So that's something Alyssa is going to be delving a little bit further into as we move forward. So speaking of our collaboration together, let's talk about Ellevation. If you're joining us from the Sidelet side and Ellevation is new to you, Ellevation is a software company that focuses exclusively on English language learners. They serve over 800 school districts around the country, and their primary goals are in program management for districts. They work on improving teacher practices, increasing student achievement when it comes to English language achievement. And one of the ways that they do that is with this wonderful instructional tool that they have built into their software. The neat thing about this instructional tool, it specifically targets English learners needing these strategies, and Sidelets education strategies are actually integrated into that tool. So I'm going to give you a little quick peek of that. If you are a Sidelets groupie, you've had Sidelets come out and work with you in your district. If you take a look at this chart, these are some of the strategies, especially QSSSA and T-Chart Pair Defend, that you'll notice are integrated into their tools. So we really work in collaboration with each other to help improve English language learner achievement. But we're going to be talking about a different tool today. So before we get started, I'm going to give you just a couple of logistics in the background. Now, this session is being recorded, so you know, and if you're here with us today, in about 24 hours, you're going to be getting an email that has a link to the presentation. So if you want to use that as your proof of attendance or just to come back and take a look at what we've been chatting about, it'll be there for you. Speaking of chat, please take a look at the chat feature. If you're new to Zoom, you can see that we have a chat feature on the bottom. And what I want to make sure is that you check, and I'm going to show it, there it is, that all panelists and attendees, if you don't make sure that that is clicked, you might only be chatting with us and then we're not going to see it. Alyssa and I won't be checking the chat because we'll be interacting for the next 30 minutes or so, but Valentina Gonzalez from Sidelets Education is going to be answering any questions that you have. So we're going to go ahead and use that. And now let's talk about Miss Alyssa. Now, as I mentioned, Alyssa and I have a lot in common. She's the Senior Instructional Content Manager for Ellevation. She was a classroom teacher herself. She was an EL instructional specialist. And then she did her master's work in what it was in curriculum and instruction, focusing on urban education and equity. So Alyssa and I had the chance to meet in person this last February at the NABE conference in Vegas. And it's so funny, Alyssa. I remember one of the things that we talked about was, what's happening in the world? Do you think this coronavirus is really going to affect us? Let's wash our hands. Let's just wash our hands and make sure. But we had no idea how it would just transform, right, the work that we're doing, especially with online learning. So I'm going to turn it on over to Alyssa, and she's going to tell us about this wonderful free resource that Ellevation has to share with all of us.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Of course.
Everyone for making the time to be here. I know how incredibly precious your time is. Many of you are juggling all of your roles as an educator and also your roles at home. You might be helping your own children with their distance learning. There is just so much going on right now, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. And my hope is that as we dig into these two items, you will get some really actionable things that you can take back with you and share with your students and their families. So we're really just going to talk about two things, which is some simple ways to prioritize students' home language as a valuable and really an invaluable resource during this real COVID crisis that we're dealing with. I know we're calling it distance learning and everyone is doing such an amazing job, but the reality is we're doing the best that we can under some really trying circumstances. And so how can we look at students' home language as the resource that it is? And then we'll give you some really concrete examples to engage families in some language-rich activities with their students using their language, which of course is their best resource. So let's jump right in. Wanted to level set on some of the terms that you'll see throughout. You may be really familiar with these, but it's nice to get on the same page. What we refer to as synchronously online is what we're doing right now. We're all here together at the same time sharing a virtual space. Asynchronous offline is could look a couple of different ways. It might be that students are assigned something ahead of time and they prepare it and come to class to do the completion of it together, share it out. It could be the opposite. During the shared class time, they're given something to do after and take home and do later on their own time. And then asynchronous offline, of course, is for the students who might not, or the scenarios where everyone might not be able to come together in an online environment. And it might involve sending materials to students or parents directly, packets, different learning materials that can kind of be sent home with students to do offline on their own. So I would love to hear from all of you using the numbers. And Anna, if you go to the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
You can use the numbers that best represent the learning environments that you're able to engage your students with. Is it mostly 1? Is it a combination of 1 and 2? Is it 2 and 3? Is it all over the place? And it really depends on the day and the student, and it's number 4. Seeing a lot of 4s.
Yes, a ton of 4s. Look at that. Oh my goodness.
It's really just a testament to the incredible work that you all are doing.
Absolutely.
No preparation for this whatsoever, to be jumping in and meeting your students' needs in so many ways. Okay, that's really helpful to get that sense. Feel free to keep sharing as we go on.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I want to talk about is making sure that everyone's making the time and space to intentionally celebrate our students' home language. We know that the language that the family speaks is incredibly important. It's part of who they are. It's their culture. It's really so important and amazing that our students come to us with so many different multilingual backgrounds. And we want to be intentional about celebrating it because we know that everyone is concerned with the amount of school that children are missing right now. And if their school environment is a primarily English environment, go ahead, Anna. We know that people might feel like they're missing out on English instruction, and that's to the detriment of the child. But the reality is that students' home language is just as important to their overall development, of course, than their English instruction alone. And so I have an oldie but a goodie research quote here at the bottom about the importance of students building up their home language, and then any additional language on top of it. And Anna's nodding her head as she has this background as well. We know it's overall the right thing for them to do, and it helps them in the long run, of course. And so this is a really nice opportunity to say, let's not focus on this as a negative that students are away from their families, but rather are away from their school environments, but rather let's think about building up this time that they are home. So just a couple examples of how to do that is to just make a point to acknowledge and praise the home language of the families. I love that, Valentina, focus on the positive. And then what we'll do today is we're going to share some really concrete examples that you can send home as learning activities and just interaction activities together. So on the first point, here's just some examples that you can use, and I'd love to, and great, Vera's asking, how would the praise look? And so it could be in an email, it could be during that synchronous time. It's making a point to say things like, it's so wonderful that you have so much time to speak your family's language right now. If anyone is feeling any sort of insecurity about being away from school, and parents are feeling, I mean, I'm a former educator and I have an elementary student home right now, and I'm feeling insecure in meeting her needs as a former teacher. But saying, you know, let's not be insecure. It's just wonderful that you have this time to speak together. Love that. Bringing in, this is a great example I'm seeing in the chat, bringing in right now that it's Ramadan, acknowledging that and that wonderful culture and celebration, and saying, you know, this is a benefit. If students are doing something in an online environment together or with you, just say you can do this at home using your home language. There's no expectation that parents whose primary language is not English, or families who don't typically speak English in the home, would be trying to do these things in English. It's really honoring that they can do so much using their home language, and really focusing on, this is a time to grow, practice, and develop in your home language. And just calling that out is so important, because even if we're thinking it, it's not always known. And if anyone is feeling insecure, feeling like, what can I possibly do to help my students right now? They've been off at school learning English and doing all their reading and learning in English. That's okay. That's what happens when school is in session. But when school is not in session, you're at home, and parents have the best gift to give their children, which is the gift of multilingualism. And so taking the time to emphasize that just kind of gets everybody on the same page and helps people feel better. I'm curious if you have any other tips for that. Feel free to share it in the chat as well.
I have a lot of people agreeing with the fact that it's just not celebrated enough, which I think is a wonderful realization to have. It's really, really powerful.
And you know, there's so much to communicate right now and to organize, and to how are we going to get this done, and should we be can we teach this, can we ask this of them? And so just to pause and say, let's acknowledge what a gift this is. And of course it comes with challenges right now, but this is a really positive point.
It's a gift. I think that's wonderful. People are saying that in the chat. That's really good to focus on.
I'm loving some of the tips I'm seeing too. Great. Okay, so now I have 3 different activities, learning activities. Anna had showed a couple of examples from Ellevation earlier of some of the great Silence activities we have. We have over 100 of these in our instructional strategies for Ellevation subscribers. But during this time of crisis, we've taken some of these, and every week we're putting them online, adapted to a distance learning environment with tips for synchronous and asynchronous learning environments. And we're going to walk through 3 of them in the next, how am I doing on time here?
You're doing just fine. We have over 15 minutes, so take your time.
All right, so the first, this is the website. We'll put it again at the end as well. What I'm going to talk about today and more is available on distance.elevationeducation.com, and it is 2 L's in Ellevation. So feel free to grab that, and we'll put it up again at the end as well. All right.
Take a little water break, no big deal.
All right. So the first activity that I want to talk about is one of my favorites. It's called Double Vision Video. And especially right now, where there are so many incredible resources available for students to stream at home. Um, we've got things like PBS Kids, different zoos, museums, all of these great online environments, videos for students to watch. And we've seen so many ed tech companies step up and provide their resources for free. It's an amazing time to be able to access information. And it's a lot of that receptive language that's coming at students, which is important and is wonderful and can be so incredibly helpful. But double vision video is a nice way to kind of mix things up and give students, English learners, an opportunity to perhaps bring down some of the language that might be overwhelming at first by showing the video twice. The first time with no sound, so they can just kind of take it in and see what they're noticing, the different visuals, any concepts they might be familiar with, and then to show it again, this time with the sound on. And so typically this is meant to be for 2 to 3 minutes, really short clips, not long videos. But it's a nice way to kind of break up the language and separate the language from the visuals for students. And what can be done is this can be done if you are working with students asynchronously in an online environment. You can ask them to watch it before they come in or have them watch it afterwards. But it's also a suggestion to have students do at home as well. So on the next slide, there's 2 concrete tips for bringing this. Oh, it's kind of cutting off on my screen a little bit.
A little bit on mine too.
Might be that it's a wide screen. Yeah, why don't you see if exiting full screen helps? It might kind of bring it down a little bit.
We might be stuck, Alyssa.
Okay. Actually, you know what I'm gonna do super fast, Anna, just because.
If you want to share, I can do that too.
Yeah, we can do that.
Whatever you think. Do you want me to stop?
Sure. Yeah. I'm just kind of playing around with the slide on my computer, my other screen a little bit. Let's see if this works. All right, the picture might be a little bit wonky, but we will give this a try. So I'm just about to share how you can do this. I'm not able to share, but you know what I did? I did change the formatting a bit. So if you share it again, we should be.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks for being patient. We just want to make sure that you're getting what you need here.
So I'll just talk through it a little bit as we wait for it to come up. There we go.
Yeah, perfect.
Great. So there's 2 tips for creating some opportunities for families to do this with their students, which is that if there's any types of videos, short videos, maybe it's that the family gets their some of their cable streamed in their home language, or they just have different websites from different places that they are able to access in their home language, just suggest that the families do it together using their home language, where they watch it first without the sound on and the second time with the sound on, and talk about it. What did they learn? What did they learn from doing the video that way? And then the second way to do it is to have the family watch the video in English that was assigned from the school or suggestion from the school. And if any of the family members are learning English themselves, or perhaps have English proficiency, but they don't typically speak English at home, it's a nice way for them to still come together in that same activity, trying it where they're watching it in English with the sound off. So really it's not English, it's just with the sound off. And then the second time with the sound on, and then they can talk about it, take that discussion into their home language and talk about what they learned, talk about what they learned and what they noticed through that experience. So again, it's a way to take all of those great online streaming resources that we have right now and just bring some tips to families to try together.
And thank you for all the attendees that are giving your wonderful tips in addition to this. I think those are going to be really helpful for everyone. And again, we'll remind you that this is being recorded, so you're going to be able to come back at the end and take a look and see what everybody's suggesting.
Great. Yeah, that's what's great about the Zooms, is they capture the recording.
Definitely.
Okay, so the second activity is called Building with Bricks and Mortar. And it's a really nice opportunity for students to focus on building strong sentences using specific target words. So the bricks are the brick words, could be put on a Post-it note, or if you're doing asynchronous offline, you're sending packets home, they could be put right on there to be cut up. And you can you ask students to put together sentences using specific target words, and they're filling those sentences in with the mortar or those other words that get filled in for a sentence. And you can scaffold this for students by providing some of those mortar words as well. You don't necessarily want to go as far as like a closed sentence, but you can help them out with some of those connecting words as well. Getting a couple of notes that folks aren't able to see. And so I am, and would just love to hear from.
I think they might be on a lag. That's my guess. That's my guess.
Great. So yeah, the brick words could be content specific. They could be connected to a text that you're reading, or maybe the video that you just watched. They can come from a variety of places, those brick words, and then the students are asked to put them together into sentences. It could be just as a speaking activity, or you could extend it into writing. So looks like most people are good on the visuals. So we'll go on to the next slide. And the two tips that we have to share for bringing this into the home language environment is to have students take the sentences that they put together in English in their learning environment and have them share it with their parents, and then their parents can ask some questions in their home language, what does that word mean, or how did you put together the sentence? And then the conversation can shift into the family's home language, but it could stem from some of those words and ideas that the student brought from the online learning environment. And then, of course, you could invite families to do this together in their home language. I think of when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about when you play charades and everybody kind of writes a couple things and puts it into the hat or whatever. You could do that with families doing anything that comes to mind. Maybe you pick a topic, or maybe it's just any words that they want to put in, and then the students are creating sentences in their home language. Their family is using verbal or written language, depending on the scenario, to just interact and give them something kind of fun to do. And I can tell you, there's a lot of hours in the day to fill with your family and your children now. And sometimes you run out of ideas for what to do that's not always on the TV. And so it's nice to be able to come up with like a game like this to do. Great. So then
For all the tips, everyone, that you're leaving. I love how we're going to even make these better.
Great. So the third one is called Find the Fib. It's pretty similar to Two Truths and a Lie. Typically in school, we've seen teachers take a text or a learning topic and write the 3 sentences, 2 of which are true, 1 of them is false, and the students have to use text evidence to identify the true and the false, the 2 true and the 1 false statement, and then discuss it with their peers. So this can be done in a online asynchronous environment. And actually, I forgot to share that on our distance learning site, we have a lot of model teaching videos of different teachers who've jumped on and volunteered to have their Zoom recorded of them interacting with kids. And there's a really great asynchronous classroom example of Find the Fib, where students were using Google Docs shared to work on their sentences together. So that's one way that you could do it asynchronously online. You could also have students work on it prior to coming to their online class, and that would be that asynchronous online example. And then for an asynchronous offline example to extend to families, what students can do, I'll have Anna go on to the next one here, is a way to bring it home is students can share in their home language, either written or verbal, 2 true and 1 false statement. It could be about anything. It could be about something that they watched on TV. It could be a book that they're reading. It could be about so many different things. And in their home language, the different family members have to try to guess which is the false statement, with the student coming forward with the ideas. It could also be spun into really a great game of everyone in the family creating their own sentences, and everyone having to guess what is the true and the false statement. And of course, can challenge people to prove it and things like that. And so it's just a nice way to take something that students might be doing in an online environment with you, or even if you're sending it home in a packet, it's just a really nice way to engage families in their home language and elevate the importance of that during this time.
That sounds so engaging.
It is fun, actually. My daughter loves it. She loves it. She tries to stump me, but I have 3 tips here, and actually, Anne, I'm gonna have you click 2 more times just so they all come up.
Sure.
Put the slide forward. Yep, just like that. Perfect. So I have a couple of tips on um, communicating with family, and one of them is a little bit of a trick on some translating that you can do using Google. So first is just to always encourage frequent communication, whatever is the norm for your school and your environment and the families that you work with. Assure that their child is doing well, and thank them for the engagement during this time. And when you do send language things home in English, like a suggestion for one of these activities, it's really important just remember to keep it concise as possible. Use visuals whenever you can. And then there is a nice Google Translate trick. And of course, we added the disclaimer on here that like Google Translate is never going to be as good or should be considered the gold star standard, because human translations, of course, is incredibly is always the highest quality and accurate. But if Anna goes on to the next slide, there is a little bit of a trick that we found in Google that you can do right within the document. So this is an example of the Find the Fib graphic organizer that we have on our distance learning site. And we do have everything on the distance learning site in English and Spanish, authentically translated by literate individuals. But what you can do is you can go into the tools, and if you click on Translate Document, it brings up dozens of languages, and you're able to actually translate that document on the spot into various languages. And of course, it's going to be done with different accuracy, but if you have someone who's able to review something that's machine translated, sometimes it's nice to get a starting point, or at least you're able to send something home. And this is directly in Google Docs. Yep, so when you're in a Google Doc, sometimes if you open a Word document in Google, you have to go over to File, Open as Google Doc. But once it's a Google Doc, you can do tools to translate the document, and it takes a few seconds. So it's a nice way, if you're not able to send things home that have been officially translated, that you can do this. And then we're seeing tons of tips in the chat too, which is wonderful, because I'm sure you
Points and say hi. Those are both great ones to use as well. Good job. Thanks for making that point about Google Translate. That's really important. It's something that I emphasize a lot with foreign language teachers as well, is that students cannot get away with using Google Translate because it's a machine. It's not a human behind it. So good point.
they are getting better,
Right.
but sometimes if you have a family who uses a language that you don't have an interpreter, and you just want to get something quick,
Right.
and that language simple, and you try, it can be a starting point.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great. So those are the big pieces of content that I had wanted to cover. And so I hope you feel that you got some concrete tips for pausing and making a point to prioritize the home language for the invaluable resource that it is. And you got tons of ideas from the chat, but hopefully also those language-rich activities that I shared with you are something that you might be able to take and bring back to your students and their families. And I think this next slide has the website on it again.
It does.
And the thing I did want to share is all of this is not required. You don't need a subscription, or you don't need to pay or anything for the distance learning site during this time. This is one of the resources we've tried to put out there for free. And we are coming out with a different activity a week. And so I think we have about 6 in there now, and we'll have 10 or 12 by the time the official school year wraps up this spring. And I know that looks different everywhere, but I did want to share that is a constantly evolving resource.
Wonderful. All right, here we go. Thank you guys so much for being just such wonderful participants. Alyssa, thank you for this information. This is so invaluable right now to our teachers, to our parents, to our students. I think this is really going to be helpful. We have some contact information down there on the bottom for both Alyssa and myself if you'd like to stay in touch. Thank you to all of our attendees and our chatters. Your wonderful positive energy was keeping us going throughout. So I'm going to show you just a couple of things that we have coming up at Sidelets. Some of you have been familiar with the free webinars that we've been offering. We're doing about 2 a week. And so your first one is today with us. And then we have one coming up this Wednesday at 10 a.m. with Natalia Heckman. And she's going to be talking about writing with paragraph frames. And she has valuable information to share. And Monday, Miss Marcy Voss is going to be talking about writing differentiated sentence stems. We have Carol Salva, who we know a lot of you are so familiar with. She's actually my co-author on Boosting Achievement, and she's going to be talking about supporting our SLIFE, our students with interrupted formal education and distance learning, a week from that Monday, the 11th. And then finally, Dr. Stephen Fleener is talking about fostering interaction in online environments on Wednesday, the 13th. Now, if you don't already know, we do a Twitter chat at Sidelets, and the hashtag is there, hashtag SideletsEdChat. It is every first and third Tuesday of the month from about 7 to 7:30, and we have very, very relevant topics to engage you with. Valentina Gonzalez, who you all are so familiar with, is the one that's leading that, so we'd love to hear from you next time. And then finally, Sidelets Education has a great blog that we've upped our game this season. We have about one blog post coming out a week, and a lot of them incredibly relevant topics to distance learning, online learning, remote learning, and what we can be doing to support our students at this time. So one more time, I want to thank everybody for their participation. Alyssa, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you all back with us next time.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Anna, and the whole Sidelets team. This was great to get together.
It's our pleasure. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.